When you have a relatively large area of a photo that you want to clean up in some way, for example, correcting damage, such as that you see at the bottom left of this image, a selection-based cleanup is often the easiest approach. And when you want to use a selection as the basis of a cleanup in Photoshop, the best choice of tools is the patch tool. Now, I actually didn't used to be a big fan of the patch tool in prior versions of Photoshop because it didn't allow you to work on a separate empty image layer. In order to use the patch tool non-destructively, you had to create a copy of your background image layer, which would double the overall file size. Now, with Photoshop CS6, we're able to use the patch tool on an empty layer, and that's certainly my preferred way of working. So let's take a look at how we can patch this area of the image at the bottom left corner using the patch tool. One thing to keep in mind with the patch tool is that we're only able to work on a separate empty image layer if the image is in the RGB color mode. I generally prefer to scan original images into the RGB color space in any event, but if you are working with a grayscale image, you'll need to convert it to RGB first if you want to work in this way. You can see that this image is currently in the grayscale mode, and so I'm going to switch it to the RGB color mode first. I'll go ahead and choose Image and then Mode, followed by RGB Color, in order to convert this image to the RGB color space. Now I can create a new empty image layer for my cleanup. I'll go ahead and click the Create New Layer button, the blank sheet of paper icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, and then I'll double click on the name for this layer so that I can type a new name, pressing Enter or Return to apply that name change. Next, I'll choose the Patch tool from the toolbox. The Patch tool is hiding underneath the Spot Healing Brush tool, so I'll click and hold my mouse on the button for the Spot Healing Brush tool in order to bring up the flyout menu, and then I'll choose the Patch tool from that flyout menu. The Patch tool behaves as a selection tool initially. Specifically, it behaves as though it were the lasso selection tool, and so I can simply click and drag on the image in order to create a selection. And generally I'll create a selection that is just a little bit larger than the area that I need to clean up. I'll then drag outside the image in this case, since the blemish continues all the way to the edge. I don't need to drag right along the edge, I just need to drag outside the image, and when I release to close my selection, that selection will automatically match up with the edge of the image. I now have a selection created that defines the area that I want to clean up, but before I actually clean up that area, I want to check my settings on the options bar. For the patch option, I want to make sure that I have Content Aware selected rather than Normal. That makes sure that the patch tool will take advantage of the Content Aware technology, which greatly improves your results in most cases. The adaptation option determines how much the pixels that you're using as the source to clean up the area that needs to be fixed can be adjusted. If I choose the very strict option, then virtually no change will be applied to most of the pixels that are being copied. If I choose very loose, then lots of change might be applied. When it's important to retain the exact structure, then you'll use very strict. And when you don't care at all about that structure, for example, cleaning up a cloudy sky where randomness is actually a very good thing, then I would use very loose. For this image, I want to go somewhere in between because I want to retain the texture of the water, but I want Photoshop to be able to blend things a little bit so that we get a little bit more randomness. So I'm going to use the medium option. I also need to make sure that the Sample All Layers checkbox is turned on. This is what enables me to copy pixels onto an empty layer from the layers below, in this case just my background image layer. So now I have the patch tool completely configured. I'll go ahead and drag my selection. Now as I do so, you'll notice that the area that I'm attempting to clean reflects the area underneath my current selection. So as I drag the selection around, I'm able to get a pretty good sense of whether or not the area that my mouse is currently over represents a good source of pixels for that destination area. I'll come out over here into an open area of water, making sure that I keep the entire selection inside the image. If I drag downward a little bit, for example, you'll see that I'm revealing a portion of the original unpatched area at the bottom left corner. So I'll drag that selection back up, make sure that the entire selection is over the water, and then I will release the mouse. Photoshop will then process that area, and what it's done is copied pixels from my source area into the destination area and then attempted to blend them, and blend them both in terms of matching overall texture but also blending into the surrounding area so that I hopefully have a very seamless result. I'll press Control D on Windows or Command D on Macintosh in order to deselect that selection so we can get a better look at the results. And overall, it looks very, very good. There is a little bit of obvious blending here. We can see a transition that's not so smooth in certain areas. For that type of cleanup, I'll tend to use the Spot Healing Brush tool. So I'll go ahead and choose the Spot Healing Brush tool from the toolbox. I'll make sure that the settings are appropriate, specifically choosing the Content Aware option and Sample All Layers. And then I can simply paint. I'll adjust my brush size a little using the left square bracket key to reduce the brush size or the right square bracket key to increase the brush size. And then I can paint along that seam and Photoshop will blend a little bit more for me. And in this case, that's working very, very well to blend the result so things look a little more seamless. So I'll continue applying a little bit of cleanup there until I'm happy with the final result. But by turning off the visibility for the cleanup layer, you can see we go from an image that has this obvious scar on it to an image that is blended pretty well. I could certainly continue applying a little bit more corrective work there to improve the blending, but as you can see, using the patch tool as the basis of a selection-based image cleanup can be very quick and easy for serious blemishes.